The night Ethan Cole read the message, he didn't breathe for almost 10 seconds. It was from his wife, Madison, the woman he'd loved through layoffs, miscarriages, and a mortgage he carried alone. He still believes they're his. "You're amazing, babe. Same hotel, 11 p.m. For a moment, he thought it was a prank, but her typing bubble appeared again, then vanished. The silence after that ping was louder than any scream. Upstairs, the woman he built his life around was tucking in the children he'd spent years calling his own. Downstairs, the man she betrayed was staring at the truth, printed in pixels, small enough to fit on a screen, powerful enough to destroy a family. He didn't shout. He didn't confront her. He just smiled. The kind of calm that only comes before a storm no one sees coming. Because Ethan wasn't the kind of man who sought revenge with rage. He sought it with evidence. But what kind of man keeps loving children who aren't his? What kind of woman risks everything for a secret she swore would never surface? And when the truth finally walked into court, who would end up losing more? The liar or the man she underestimated? Ethan set his phone on the table, the glow from the screen fading into the stillness of the room. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence like a heartbeat. He rubbed his thumb across the edge of the phone, not sure if it was trembling or if his world simply had. Upstairs, Madison's voice floated faintly down the staircase. Soft laughter, a lullaby, the click of the bedroom lamp turning off. The sound stabbed and soothed all at once. He stood, walked to his office, and turned on the printer. The small mechanical whir broke the silence. A single sheet of paper slid out, carrying 8 words that had ended his marriage before dawn. He folded it twice. No rage, no panic, only precision. He slipped the paper into a beige envelope, labeled it Receipts, 2025, and placed it inside the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet. His hands were steady. His heart wasn't. At 7:15 the next morning, the world pretended nothing had happened. Sunlight poured into the kitchen. The smell of pancakes and butter filled the air. Madison wore his old Yale sweatshirt, the same one she used to wear when they first moved into this house. Her hair was still damp from the shower, her tone light, her eyes pretending peace. "Morning, babe," she said, humming. "Morning," he answered, smiling like a man rehearsing normalcy. She kissed his cheek as she packed lunchboxes. "You've got that meeting with Lydia today, right?" "Yeah," he said, watching her pour orange juice for the kids. "And you've got..." "What, errands?" Madison looked up quickly, eyes sharp for half a second before softening again. "Just grocery shopping. You know, boring stuff." "Right," he said, turning away before his expression betrayed him. He looked at his children, Ava and Caleb, both laughing over spilled syrup, both innocent, both glowing with the kind of love he had believed was built on truth. He felt the weight of that printed message burning through the drawer upstairs. He smiled at them anyway. "Finish up, little man," he said to Caleb. "Daddy's got to run soon." Later at the office, Ethan's calm turned clinical. His fingers typed slowly, deliberately. He searched for Rachel Quinn, the private investigator his colleague once mentioned during a corporate dispute. Her tagline on the site read, "Discretion is currency, truth is proof." He dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "Quinn Investigations." "Rachel Quinn?" he said, his voice steady. "Yes, speaking." "I need confirmation," he said. "For what?" "My wife's honesty." There was a pause on the other end, a professional silence that had heard this story before. "What kind of confirmation?" "The kind that can't be deleted." That night, Ethan returned home early. Madison was curled on the couch in leggings, pretending to scroll through Netflix, a glass of wine half empty beside her. "How was work?" she asked, her voice light, her eyes never leaving the TV. "Same old," he said, removing his jacket. "You?" "Exhausting," she sighed. "Caleb spilled orange juice all over his shoes." Ethan smiled faintly, studying her. "You ever send a message to the wrong person?" Her head snapped up. "What?" "Just wondering. I did once. Sent a private memo to the wrong client. Whole thing was awkward." She laughed nervously. "Huh. Yeah, been there." He nodded, lips curling into a gentle half-smile. "Good thing it was just business." Then he walked upstairs, closing the door quietly behind him. Madison exhaled in relief, unaware that her mask had just cracked for the first time. In his study, Ethan opened his leather journal and wrote with clean, deliberate strokes. Step 1. Stay calm. Let her believe you're blind. Evidence loves silence. He underlined it once. Then he looked out the window. His reflection split against the night. Madison moved past the kitchen light below, a shadow framed in gold. He whispered to himself, almost tenderly, kindness is the perfect disguise. Rain streaked across Ethan's windshield as he parked a block away from the old brick cafe where Rachel Quinn had agreed to meet. He waited a moment, watching people rush in and out of the warm yellow light inside, strangers sharing laughter, stories, lies. He adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror, not to impress, but to steady himself. When he entered, Rachel was already there, mid-40s, sharp eyes, a plain black coat, and an expression that didn't need small talk. Mr. Cole, she greeted, sliding a small notepad across the table. Tell me what you know. Ethan sat, folding his hands carefully. Enough to destroy my marriage. Not enough to win in court. Rachel's eyebrow arched slightly. So you're not here for closure? No, he said quietly. I'm here for proof. She studied him. Calm voice. No bitterness, no theatrics. Just clarity. Good, she said finally. Angry clients make mistakes. Calm ones win. She wrote down the essentials. Dates, possible locations, names. When she asked for the other man's name, Ethan hesitated. Then slowly, Derek Lane. He's a real estate developer. Married once. Wealthy. Too confident. Rachel nodded once. Any pattern? Ethan leaned back, recalling details he hadn't realized he'd been collecting. The sudden perfume that wasn't hers. The new necklace she said she found on sale. The weekend she claimed to visit her mother, but always turned off her phone after 10 p.m. Rachel tapped her pen against the table. I'll start there. Phone records, GPS logs, hotels. Do not confront her yet. You'll warn her and lose leverage. Ethan's voice barely rose above a whisper. Leverage is all I have left. 3 days later, an unmarked envelope arrived at his office. Inside were photographs. Clean, time-stamped, undeniable. Madison's silver sedan parked outside the Crescent Hotel, Derek's black SUV arriving minutes later. A shot of them in the lobby, too close for coincidence, too familiar for friends. A separate photo showed a valet slip signed with Derek's initials, the timestamp matching Madison's yoga class. Ethan stared at each picture until his eyes burned. He placed them in a manila folder and labeled it Phase 1. That night, Madison walked into the bedroom, humming, towel around her hair, pretending innocence as always. Long day, she asked. Productive, he replied without looking up from his laptop. She smiled faintly, relief flickering in her eyes. He caught it, that tiny flash of comfort that came from believing she was still safe. He smiled back. You deserve some rest. A week later, Rachel called again. I followed her credit card activity, she said flatly. Multiple dinners charged to Derek's company card. Jewelry purchase. Same pattern. And Ethan could hear her pause. And what? Private school tuition, paid from a trust under Lane Holdings, the same trust Derek uses for property investments. Ethan didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. When he did, his tone was surgical. So he's funding my family. Yes, Rachel said. You want me to keep going? Absolutely. I want him to pay for every cent, legally. That evening, Ethan sat alone in his office, staring at old photos. The family portrait from 3 years ago, Madison's smile pressed against his cheek, the children's laughter frozen in time. The innocence of it stung. He opened his journal again. Step 2, trace the money. Step 3, follow the silence. He underlined silence, twice. The next day, he scheduled a meeting with Claire Bennett, a forensic accountant. Her office smelled of coffee and data, spreadsheets glowing on every screen. She greeted him with brisk warmth. Rachel sent your file. You're looking for financial irregularities tied to your spouse's account? Yes, Ethan said, and anything that ties to Derek Lane's holdings. Within minutes, Claire pulled up linked transactions, identical dollar amounts from different accounts. the kind that looked innocent until you layered the timeline. "See this?" she said, zooming in. "These recurring payments match the tuition dates for your kid's school." "Explain," he said quietly. "They're being paid by someone who isn't you. It's masked through a vendor account, but the source is Lane Holdings LLC." Ethan stared at the screen, the numbers forming a pattern of betrayal clearer than any photograph. Claire leaned back. "You've got enough for legal discovery, but I'd advise patience. Let the transactions build. The bigger the timeline, the stronger the case." "Patience," Ethan murmured. "That's the one thing she taught me well." That night, Madison came home late again. Her perfume hit before the door closed. She tried to tiptoe upstairs, but Ethan was waiting at the kitchen counter, laptop open. He didn't look up. "You're home late." She froze mid-step. "Traffic." "Right," he said, closing the laptop. "You should get some rest. You look tired." Her eyes darted toward him, studying his calm, but his expression was unreadable. She smiled awkwardly and went upstairs. Ethan listened to the sound of her footsteps fading down the hall, each one echoing like a countdown. He opened his drawer, took out the envelope marked Phase 1, and slid it into a larger folder now labeled Phase 2. Finance. His handwriting was neat, deliberate. He whispered into the quiet kitchen. "She thinks I'm broken. She has no idea I'm building her ending." Outside, rain started again, gentle against the windows, the same rhythm it had the night he first read that text. Only this time, he wasn't staring at a screen in disbelief. He was documenting a case. And every raindrop that hit the glass felt like a clock ticking closer to justice. The night Madison Cole realized her husband was watching her, she didn't even know it. Ethan had spent the day reviewing Claire's financial analysis. Lines of data that spelled betrayal more clearly than any confession could. Every charge, every date, every hotel. He didn't rage. He organized, printed statements, labeled folders, evidence photographs, arranged in perfect chronological order, each one a story of how kindness had been mistaken for blindness. By evening, the sky outside his office had turned violet, city lights blinking through the glass. He closed the folder, placed it neatly on the dining table, and began to cook dinner. Steak, mashed potatoes, the same meal he used to make when they were broke but happy. When Madison walked in, she stopped mid-step, surprised by the sight of candles. Her lipstick was new. Her perfume wasn't the one he'd bought her. "Wow," she said, trying to sound playful. "What's all this?" Ethan smiled softly. "Dinner. We haven't had one in a while, have we?" Madison hesitated, then laughed. Nervous, guilty laughter masked his charm. "You're right. It's been hectic lately." He poured her wine, sat across from her, and began to eat quietly. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was deliberate. Every second of it was a mirror. "So," he began gently, "how's your mom doing?" Madison's fork paused midair. "She's fine." "Why?" "Just curious," he said. "You mentioned you'd visit her last Saturday. I called to say hi, but she said she hasn't seen you in weeks." Her hand froze. The sound of her fork touching the plate was louder than it should have been. She blinked, recovered, smiled. "Oh, she probably forgot. You know how she is." "Sure," he said softly. "She forgets a lot." He sipped his wine, eyes calm, studying her like a man who already knew the ending. Madison's phone vibrated on the table. She flipped its screen down, too quickly. "Work?" he asked, still smiling. She hesitated. "Just Nora, probably about the fundraiser." "Right," he said. "Nora's always punctual." She forced a laugh. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," he said. "Just conversation." Halfway through dinner, Ethan stood and walked to his study. "Stay there," he said gently. "I've got something to show you." Madison's throat tightened. When he returned, he was holding a folder. Plain, harmless looking. He placed it on the table, slid it toward her. "Open it," he said. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the flap. Inside, photos, receipts, credit card statements, hotel timestamps, and one printed text message. He still believes they're his. "You're amazing, babe. Same hotel, 11 p.m. Madison's lips parted, a soundless gasp. The room shrank. Her eyes darted up to meet his, searching for fury, but there was none, only stillness. Ethan, he leaned forward, voice low, controlled. I'm not going to shout, he said. You've already made enough noise for both of us. Tears filled her eyes. It's not what you think. He laughed softly, heartbreak laced with irony. Madison, you don't get to start your defense with a cliché. She covered her face. Please, it was a mistake. Which part? He asked. The text, the hotel, the tuition payments, or telling him the kids were his? Her hands fell away. You had me followed? No, he said. I had you documented. Madison stood abruptly, voice shaking. You're insane. This is obsession. Ethan's calm cut her sentence in half. You spent years lying to me, to our children, to everyone who ever saw us and thought we were love. You called that a life. I call it evidence. She stared at him, silent now. He stood, collecting the folder, placing it back under his arm. I'm not here to hurt you, Madison, he said quietly. I'm here to make sure you can't hurt anyone else again. She tried to reach for him, sobbing. Ethan, please. He stepped back. Save your tears. You'll need them for court. Then he walked out, leaving her at the table, the candles still burning, the wine untouched, and the truth sitting naked between them. Upstairs, Ethan leaned against the hallway wall, closing his eyes. His heartbeat was calm, not because he felt nothing, but because he had finally chosen the kind of silence that wins. He opened his phone, typed one line in his notes app. Step 4, confront without explosion. Let guilt do the shouting. Then he deleted the folder's photo from his device, not because he was done with it, but because it already lived where it mattered most, in his lawyer's email. And downstairs, the woman who had thought she'd outsmarted kindness finally realized she had been living with strategy disguised as love. Morning light spilled through the blinds in narrow bars. Ethan stood in front of the mirror, buttoning his shirt with movements that felt automatic. He'd learned that calm wasn't peace, it was armor. Across the house, Madison hummed while packing the kids' lunches, the same melody she used when she wanted life to feel normal. He watched her reflection in the hallway mirror. Everything about her looked familiar except her eyes. They were constantly calculating distance. Coffee? She asked, voice sweet, cautious. He nodded, took the cup and smiled. Thanks. To anyone watching, they looked like love. To him, it felt like evidence in disguise. 2 days after the confrontation, Ethan met Jordan Reeves, his attorney, in a quiet downtown office that smelled of paper and ambition. Jordan flipped through the folders. Photos, receipts, bank transfers, Rachel Quinn's reports. This is solid, he said, but to build an airtight case, we'll need biological proof for the custody motion. Ethan's hand didn't tremble. DNA. Jordan nodded. You're ready for that? Ethan looked out the window, the city below moving like it hadn't heard his world collapse. She said he believes they're his. Let's find out who she meant. The following week, Dr. Lawson, a discreet DNA specialist, conducted the tests under court authorization. Madison thought it was a routine update for the kids' medical records. She signed the consent form with a distracted smile, scrolling through her phone. Ethan stood quietly beside her, helping Ava unwrap a lollipop. The room smelled of disinfectant and truth. Dr. Lawson met him alone later that week. Mr. Cole, he said, laying 2 envelopes on the table. The results are conclusive. You're not the biological father. Ethan stared at the envelopes. Small, thin, yet heavy enough to end a lineage. He slid them into his briefcase without opening them. Thank you, doctor. Outside, he stood by his car for several minutes, feeling the ground tilt beneath him, not from shock, but from clarity. That night, Madison was folding laundry when the front door opened. Ethan walked in, calm as ever, carrying 2 envelopes and a white folder. Long day? She asked. He set the folder on the table. Productive. What's that? Paperwork. She laughed softly. Work never ends with you. He smiled. It's about to. He didn't explain further. He just kissed the kids goodnight, then walked into his study and locked the door. Inside, he emailed Jordan Reeves one sentence. Proceed with filing, full custody, asset freeze, paternity proof attached. Then he attached scanned copies of the DNA results. The next morning, Madison woke to a knock at the door. A process server in a navy jacket stood on the porch, holding an envelope. Mrs. Cole? Yes? You've been served. Her hands shook as she tore it open. The words petition for dissolution of marriage printed in bold across the top. Attached, motion for custody, motion to freeze assets, notice of paternity determination. She stumbled backward, eyes darting across the pages, her heartbeat drowning the quiet. Ethan, she shouted, running to the living room. He was sitting calmly on the couch, tying his shoes. What is this? He didn't look up. Reality. You're divorcing me? He stood, meeting her eyes. I'm recognizing you. She clutched the papers. You can't do this. He cut her off gently. Madison, you did this. I'm just documenting it. By afternoon, social ripples began. Lydia Park, Ethan's sister, removed Madison from the family group chat. Nora Fields, Madison's best friend, left a voice note full of awkward sympathy that ended with, "You might want to lay low. People are talking." Meanwhile, Jordan Reeves filed the case under seal to protect the children. Within 24 hours, the judge granted Ethan a temporary restraining order on joint accounts. Madison's credit cards declined by evening. Derek Lane transferred $50,000 in panic. Too late. The court had already flagged the transaction. That night, Ethan sat at his desk, alone with his thoughts in the faint hum of the city. He opened his journal. Step 5. Expose the truth legally. Let paper, not anger, do the damage. He underlined the sentence once. Then he wrote another line beneath it. Step 6. Be kind to the children. They didn't lie. They were lied to. He closed the notebook, exhaled, and looked toward the hallway where Ava's laughter drifted through the door. For the first time in months, he felt something close to peace. Not because the pain was gone, but because the truth finally had a witness that mattered. The law. The courtroom wasn't grand, just cold marble floors and stale air. But to Ethan Cole, it felt like justice had finally found a microphone. Across the aisle sat Madison, hands clasped, face pale under foundation. Beside her, Derek Lane, arrogant even in defeat, suit sharp, smirk tight as a knot. Ethan's lawyer, Jordan Reeves, stood like a surgeon preparing for open-heart truth. He leaned toward Ethan. You ready? Ethan's voice was quiet. I've been ready since the night she texted the wrong man. Judge Eleanor Hamilton entered, firm voice echoing through the chamber. Case number 4327C, Cole versus Cole. Let's begin. The sound of shuffling papers followed. The judge's gavel struck once, not for order, but for inevitability. Jordan started with the foundation. Your Honor, this case isn't about heartbreak. It's about deception, financial, emotional, and legal. My client, Mr. Cole, discovered that for years his wife misrepresented their children's parentage, diverted funds through her lover's company, and used marriage as a cover for fraud. Madison flinched. Her attorney objected. Your Honor, this is emotional embellishment. Judge Hamilton raised her hand. Counsel, if he has documentation, I'll allow it. Jordan nodded, sliding exhibits forward like dominoes. Bank statements. Shell LLC transfers from Lane Holdings. Hotel receipts dated during Madison's supposed charity retreats. DNA test results certified by Dr. Lawson. The courtroom went still. Judge Hamilton flipped through the exhibits, her face unreadable. Is this accurate, Mrs. Cole? Madison's lips trembled. I need to consult. Answer the question, the judge said firmly. Her silence answered louder than words. From the second row, Lydia Park watched, eyes cold with both pity and satisfaction. She had spent years defending her brother's marriage. Now watching Madison cornered by her own signatures, she didn't blink. Rachel Quinn, the private investigator, took the stand next. Her voice was clinical, detached. I observed multiple meetings between Mrs. Cole and Mr. Lane at the Crescent Hotel. I documented 6 visits within a 30-day period. Receipts and valet slips corroborate these observations. Jordan's next question cut like glass. Were the children present during any of these visits? Rachel shook her head. No, sir. Each meeting was private and late night. When Claire Bennett, the forensic accountant, testified, Derek shifted in his seat. She presented digital records tracing over $120,000 in disguised payments. Tuition fees, luxury purchases, even a private spa membership listed under vendor entertainment. Jordan turned to Derek. Mr. Lane, care to explain why your company paid for another man's children's school tuition? Derek's jaw tightened. That's a private matter. Jordan smiled faintly. It was, until you made it public with corporate funds. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Even Madison's attorney looked uneasy. During recess, Madison cornered Ethan near the hallway. Her voice was low, trembling. You're destroying me. He looked at her calm. No, I'm documenting you. She blinked, tears forming. You think you'll win everything? He leaned closer, voice steady. No, Madison, I don't want everything. Just the truth. The rest collapses on its own. She tried to reach for his hand, but he stepped back, walking away as the bailiff called court back to order. That afternoon, Nora Fields, Madison's former best friend, was called to testify. She shifted nervously under oath. I just know she was seeing him. Madison told me once she didn't love Ethan anymore, that Derek made her feel alive. She said Ethan would never find out because he was too decent to look. The words landed like bullets in silence. Ethan didn't react. His restraint spoke louder than any anger could. Judge Hamilton folded her hands, looking at Madison. You built a lie, Mrs. Cole. You built it with his kindness. That's not just infidelity. That's exploitation. Madison broke down in sobs, whispering, I made a mistake. The judge's tone softened slightly. Mistakes end with apologies, not offshore transfers. By the end of the day, Judge Hamilton ruled on temporary orders. Ethan retained full custody of Ava and Caleb until the final judgment. Madison's accounts frozen. Derek Lane placed under audit for misuse of corporate funds. Media gag lifted for factual public reporting. The gavel struck once more. Court adjourned until final ruling. The sound echoed like a door closing on an era. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the steps. Cameras flashed, voices shouted questions. Ethan walked past them in silence, his expression calm. No triumph, no hate. Behind him, Madison tried to cover her face with her handbag, while Derek barked at the press. This is personal. But the truth was already public. One journalist shouted, Mr. Cole, any comment on the verdict? Ethan paused, turned slightly toward the cameras, and said quietly, No comment. The evidence speaks for itself. Then he walked to his car, the envelope of legal orders tucked under his arm. Rain began to fall. Again, as if the sky was cleaning the world he'd just burned down. He slid into the driver's seat, took a deep breath, and whispered to himself, Step 7. Never raise your voice. Let justice do it for you. By the following Monday, the courthouse was quieter, but the world outside was not. A journalist named Kelly West had been sitting in the back row during the hearings, jotting notes with a calm precision that made Ethan pay attention. She never approached him, never asked questions. She just watched. 3 days later, her article dropped online. The headline was subtle, almost elegant. The Cost of Secrets, How a Trusted Marriage Became a Corporate Scandal. It didn't need drama. The facts were fire enough. The story detailed everything public record allowed. The timeline, the trust funds, the falsified tuition payments, and the DNA results. Names weren't redacted. Within hours, social media was a storm. Lane affair trended nationwide. Derek Lane's company stock dropped 6% before noon. Madison Cole's name flooded every gossip column, each one dissecting her charity appearances, her designer purchases, and her fake speeches about family values. But Ethan? He said nothing. That morning, he was in his office reviewing quarterly reports when his phone buzzed. Lydia had sent him the link with 3 words. You stayed kind. They didn't. He opened it once, read halfway, then closed the tab. He didn't need to see their humiliation. It was already scheduled. Outside his office window, life went on. The city kept moving. Inside, Ethan's desk looked the same. Neat, minimal, except for one closed folder labeled Aftermath. By afternoon, reporters camped outside Derek Lane's real estate headquarters. Employees whispered as Derek stormed in, face tight, yelling at PR assistants. "Take it down, all of it!" But the truth had no delete button. Investors demanded an emergency audit. Emails leaked showing Derek's misuse of corporate funds, tuition, travel, jewelry, all tagged vendor engagement. The board suspended him pending review. His assistant Brad, nervous and young, confirmed the transactions during questioning. Derek tried to call Madison. She didn't answer. Madison, meanwhile, sat in her car outside a coffee shop, sunglasses hiding mascara-streaked tears. Her phone vibrated nonstop. Missed calls, reporters, former friends pretending to check in. One text from Nora stood out. "They know everything. Lay low. You're trending for the wrong reasons." Madison scrolled through comments, photos of her in court, captions calling her the socialite who fooled everyone. She threw the phone onto the passenger seat and screamed into her hands. Inside her purse, one letter sat crumpled, the temporary custody order bearing Ethan's name. That evening, Kelly West appeared live on television. Her voice was calm, factual. "This case isn't just about infidelity. It's about deception sustained through privilege and the quiet brilliance of a man who used truth as his weapon." The camera showed a clip of Ethan walking down courthouse steps, refusing to comment. Kelly continued, "When silence becomes strategy, lies collapse under their own weight." The internet replayed that line millions of times. At home, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, the one where the confrontation had happened weeks ago. He wasn't watching TV. He was writing thank you notes to Rachel, Claire, and Jordan. Each letter short, sincere, written in blue ink. "You didn't just win me a case, you helped me protect peace." On the counter sat the envelope of DNA results. He hadn't opened it since. He didn't need to. Truth didn't require revisiting. He poured himself a drink, took a slow sip, and stared out the window where rain tapped gently against the glass. Soft, rhythmic, familiar. Across town, Derek met with his attorney. The news was grim. "Your investors are pulling out," the lawyer said. "The state is reviewing your filings. If they prove corporate misuse, you're done." Derek's jaw flexed. "This was supposed to stay private," the lawyer sighed. "So was the affair." Derek slammed his fist on the table, then buried his face in his hands. Outside, camera flashes painted the glass white. Meanwhile, Madison's charity board removed her for ethical violations. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A calm voice. "Mrs. Cole, this is from your bank. We're freezing joint assets as per the court order." She hung up before the sentence finished. Tears spilled again, not from guilt this time, but from the sudden recognition that every bridge she'd built was now burning in silence. At the same time, Ethan was tucking Ava and Caleb into bed. The children laughed as he read them their favorite bedtime story, unaware that every headline outside carried their last name. "Daddy," Ava asked sleepily, "are you sad?" Ethan smiled faintly. "No, honey, just tired of pretending." She nodded, half asleep. "Mommy says sorry." He kissed her forehead gently. "Then she's learning." Downstairs, his phone buzzed. An email from Kelly West. "Mr. Cole, I know you didn't want to speak, but if you ever decide to share your side for the record, the world will listen. Kelly." He stared at the message for a while, then deleted it. The story didn't need his words. His silence had already written the ending. He poured another glass, opened his journal, and wrote, "Step 8. Exposure through truth, not vengeance. Let the world punish what I don't have to." He underlined it once, then closed the book. Outside, the rain stopped. For the first time in months, the world felt clean again. Spring sunlight cut across the courtroom windows, sharp and unflinching. The room felt colder than usual. Truth had that effect when it finally stopped hiding. Ethan Cole sat at the plaintiff's table, still, composed, dressed in a navy suit that looked pressed by patience itself. To his right, Jordan Reeves whispered final notes. Across from them, Madison stared at the table in front of her, Trembling fingers locked together. Beside her, Derek Lane looked smaller than his tailored suit, arrogance replaced by dread. The bailiff's voice cut through the hush. Case number 437C, Cole versus Cole. Final ruling. Judge Hamilton entered, black robes swaying as she took her seat. Let's conclude this. Jordan stood. Your Honor, over the last 3 months we have provided evidence, verifiable, time-stamped and certified, that shows systematic deceit. The defendant, Mrs. Cole, concealed her relationship with Mr. Lane, misused marital assets, and knowingly misrepresented the paternity of 2 minors. Mr. Cole's response was not vengeance, but verification. Every claim supported by documentation. He paused, letting the weight settle. Today, we are not seeking sympathy. We're seeking accountability. Madison's lawyer rose shakily. Your Honor, my client acknowledges mistakes but requests leniency. She has children to consider, Judge Hamilton cut in. Children who are biologically Mr. Lane's, not Mr. Cole's. The words landed like thunder. Madison's tears broke quietly. Derek shifted, jaw clenched. Proceed, the judge said. Jordan called his final witness, Claire Bennett, the forensic accountant. Her testimony was surgical. Transaction IDs, shell accounts, emails recovered from Lane Holding servers. The courtroom projector displayed the evidence 1 line at a time. Each transfer, Claire said, tapping her laser pointer, originated from Mr. Lane's corporate account, funneled into a private joint card Mrs. Cole managed. Over $137,000 in combined unauthorized expenditures. Judge Hamilton leaned back, eyes steady. Mr. Lane, do you dispute these figures? Derek's voice cracked for the first time. No, Your Honor. Do you understand that misrepresenting company funds constitutes corporate fraud under state law? He swallowed. Yes. Then this court recommends immediate review by financial authorities. The gavel struck once, soft but final. Ethan didn't smile. He didn't blink. His silence was discipline, not detachment. When Madison was called to testify, she stood like someone half awake. Her voice trembled. I never meant to hurt him. Jordan's reply was calm but cutting. Yet you did. Deliberately, repeatedly, and with someone else's money. She wiped her eyes. I was lonely. Judge Hamilton's tone stayed neutral. Mrs. Cole, loneliness doesn't transfer ownership of truth. You manipulated kindness into currency. A hush fell. The only sound was a reporter's pen scratching across paper. By midday, the courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the judge prepared her ruling. She read from the document slowly, each sentence an execution of illusion. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Ethan Cole, full physical and legal custody of minors Ava and Caleb awarded to Mr. Cole. Mrs. Cole's claim for spousal support is denied. The court further finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct involving Mr. Derek Lane, recommending referral to the Attorney General's office for investigation. She looked at Ethan. Mr. Cole, you have displayed restraint this court rarely witnesses. Justice appreciates silence when it serves truth. Then her eyes turned toward Madison and Derek. And to both defendants, actions have consequences. Lies, when calculated, write their own verdicts. The gavel came down hard. Case closed. Outside, flash bulbs ignited like lightning. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Cole, what do you say to those calling this the most disciplined revenge in years? Ethan stopped, adjusted his tie, and said evenly, it wasn't revenge. It was correction. He walked through the swarm, not toward victory, but toward closure. Behind him, Madison stumbled out of the courthouse, surrounded by whispers. Her heels clicked against the marble, each step echoing regret. Derek followed, head lowered, surrounded by photographers capturing the fall of a man who once built towers of glass. That night, news stations replayed the ruling. Social feeds flooded with Ethan's quote, "It wasn't revenge, it was correction." The line became a headline, a message, a mirror. Meanwhile, in his quiet home, Ethan poured water into 2 glasses and set them beside Ava and Caleb's homework. He tucked them in himself, reading the same story he had before the chaos began. Ava looked up sleepily. Daddy, are we okay now? He smiled, brushing her hair from her face. We're honest now. That's better than okay. When the house grew silent, Ethan opened his journal one last time. He wrote slowly, deliberately. Step 9, victory without vanity. Truth needs no celebration. Step 10, forgive, not for them, but for myself. He closed the book, placed it back in the drawer with the others marked receipts, and finally turned off the light. Outside, the world moved on. But inside, the man who was once betrayed had built something rarer than revenge, peace earned by precision. Morning sun crept across Ethan Cole's living room, tracing soft gold lines over the framed photos that had once defined a perfect family. Now they were relics, honest and haunting at the same time. The house was quiet except for the sound of Ava and Caleb's laughter from the backyard. Their giggles bounced off the walls, untouched by the storm that had destroyed everything else. Ethan stood by the window, coffee mug in hand, watching them chase bubbles under the spring light. There was a stillness in him now, not emptiness, not victory, just a quiet kind of freedom. Across town, Madison Cole sat alone in a half-packed apartment, the curtains drawn, the furniture half sold. Her phone buzzed with yet another message she didn't open. Her name had become a cautionary tale. Talk shows, podcasts, newspaper columns dissecting the Cole case. She scrolled through an article headline, "The Husband Who Beat Betrayal Without Saying a Word." Her reflection in the dark phone screen didn't look like the woman who once smiled at charity galas. She looked older, smaller. She reached for a photo, her and Ethan on their wedding day, and set it face down. At Lane Holdings, Derek's name had been quietly removed from the building's directory. His former assistant, Brad, testified in the corporate audit. Within weeks, Derek was charged with tax fraud and misuse of company funds. He tried to call Madison. She never picked up. The empire he'd flaunted in front of cameras was now dismantled, piece by piece. Every luxury he'd bought her was frozen under court order. For the first time, Derek Lane couldn't buy silence. Back at home, Ethan set 2 plates on the dining table. Pancakes shaped like stars, syrup drizzled perfectly the way the kids loved it. Ava came running in barefoot, laughing. "Daddy," Mommy texted again. Ethan's hand paused midair. "What did she say, sweetheart?" Ava shrugged, holding up the tablet. "She said she's sorry and she wants to see us." He smiled gently, taking the tablet from her small hands. "We'll talk about that soon." Then he crouched down, looking her in the eyes. "Do you know why we tell the truth?" She thought for a moment, then answered, "So people can trust us." He kissed her forehead. "Exactly." He glanced toward Caleb, who was coloring a picture at the table, a stick figure family holding hands under a bright sun. The drawing still included a woman in a dress beside him. Ethan said nothing. He just smiled. Later that afternoon, Ethan drove alone to a quiet park. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. He sat on a bench overlooking the lake, the same place he and Madison used to come before they were parents, before lies had currency. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed white envelope. Inside, a short letter. He'd written it weeks earlier, before the final verdict. He opened it slowly, reading his own handwriting. "Madison, I don't hate you. Hate is a luxury I don't carry anymore. I loved you enough to believe in us, and that love blinded me. But now I see clearly, not through anger, but through truth. You took my trust and turned it into your mask. So I'm giving you what you never gave me. Closure. Tell the kids the truth when they're ready. They deserve that much honesty from at least one of their parents. Ethan." He folded the letter neatly, sealed it again, and dropped it into the mailbox across the street. No return address, no bitterness, just an ending. That evening, Ethan drove the kids to the beach. They ran barefoot along the sand, chasing waves, laughing as the wind tangled their hair. For the first time, their laughter didn't sound borrowed. It sounded whole. As the sun sank below the horizon, Ava pointed at the sky. "Look, Daddy, pink clouds." Ethan smiled. "Those are called promises." She tilted her head. "What kind of promises?" He looked at her, his voice soft but certain. "The kind that never need to be proven." Later that night, after tucking them into bed, Ethan sat at his desk and opened his leather-bound journal one final time. He turned to the last page, wrote slowly, and let the ink dry before closing it forever. Final step. When revenge ends, kindness begins. Not because they deserve it, but because I do. He set the journal in the drawer beside the old folder labeled Receipts 2025. For the first time, he didn't need to open it again. In another part of the city, Madison found the letter waiting on her doorstep. She opened it under the flicker of a dim lamp, tears dropping onto the ink. By the time she reached the last line, she was sobbing. Not because of what she'd lost, but because he had managed to stay kind after everything she'd done. That kindness, more than any verdict, was the punishment she couldn't escape. Days later, Kelly West published one last follow-up article. He didn't ruin them. He let truth do it. In a world obsessed with revenge, Ethan Cole proved that silence can be louder than destruction. It went viral again, but this time Ethan didn't notice. He was too busy living. He'd lost everything false and gained everything real. Because sometimes the cruelest revenge is forgiveness that never looks back.